Welcome back to another Healthy Minds live streaming meditation. My name is Jay. If you don't know, Healthy Minds Innovations is a nonprofit that's translating science into tools for well-being. And one of those avenues, especially in this pandemic, has been live streaming meditations like this. And the theme for this week is dealing with negativity overload. When I received this theme, I immediately gravitated to that word overload. In fact, we can be overloaded by a lot of things in a negative way. We can be overloaded with anxiety and stress and worry. We can be overwhelmed with negativity and spirals of negativity. We can just be overwhelmed with having lots to do, cognitive overload, where we're just full of, trying to plan this and plan that and strategize this. There's a lot of ways that we can be overloaded, especially when situations beyond our control, such as this pandemic, wreak havoc into our lives. We're kind of creatures of habit. We like routine, and it can be very challenging to deal with the inevitable changes of life. And sometimes life throws us these curveballs where we're forced to deal with it, and that's often the time where we find ourselves overloaded. Anyway, glad to be here. If you could say hi in the chat, it's always nice to hear from you. Love to know where you're at, how you're feeling. And so let's talk a little bit about our approach to being overwhelmed in negativity before we dive into a short meditation. So one of the ways I've heard this framed that I think has been the most useful for me personally in my own life and my own practice is that there's two real approaches to dealing with a challenging situation. We can lean into it, or we can pull away from it. And I find that when I'm most fluent and able to deal with challenges and negativity is when I'm able to balance those two. So if I'm always pulling away and distracting myself from the challenges of my life, watching TV shows and playing on my phone or playing video games or just, having a beer, whatever it might be, just trying to get away from it all. If that's the only thing I do, I can descend into really negative patterns of behavior that are not helpful in the long term. And that might be something you know already. What's maybe not obvious is I find that I also can go the opposite direction. If I really just kind of get into my personal development mindset and I'm going to tackle this all head on and I'm going to dive in, I'm going to lean in, I'm going to get curious about my negative experiences, and I'm just constantly trying to meditate through every problem. That can also be a really challenging frame as well, because I find myself getting all tight and wrapped up and just overexposing myself to these negative emotions in a way that's not really constructive and sometimes can be destructive. So I think the trick is really to kind of find your way to find a balance between pulling away and leaning in. And I think we're all pretty well versed with how to pull away from our challenges. I think we're wired from birth with the ability to just run away from our problems. I think we just all have that deep within us. We know how to turn on Netflix and binge watch a show all day and never think about work and family and money and whatever's stressing us out. But what meditation can teach us is how to skillfully lean in and approach a problem. And that's what we're going to try. And so right away I want to say, if you're currently dealing with something really negative, first of all, this may not be a time to lean in and focus, in which case I'd encourage you to find a way to pull away and relax, go for a walk, take a bath, watch a TV show. I think that's healthy and not something to be scoffed at if used sparingly. Also, if you already have a practice that you have some momentum with, feel free to use this time to share this space of community online and do whatever practice you have momentum with. And if at any point the guidance that I'm offering feels not appropriate or unsafe or anything like that, it's always in your power to sit back and just listen and not practice or do something else. Really take care of yourself. That's the number one priority. What we're going to do for we're only going to do 5 minutes, because I really believe if we're honest with ourselves, when we're overloaded, we don't always have the bandwidth to sit and do a 20-minute meditation. So let's get realistic here and say, we're just going to do 5 minutes and see what we can do. So we're going to spend 5 minutes really kind of leaning into resistance and negativity, and seeing if we can accept our challenges before we try to do anything about them. So really lean in and get curious and open about what negativity overload might feel like. And even if we're not overloaded in this moment, to notice resistance and negativity anyway, and start to practice the skill of getting familiar with it and bringing some sort of clarity into what's happening in our experience. So, hi Liz, hi Christine, glad to have you here. Hello everyone else. Let's get started. So find yourself a comfortable position. It helps a lot to stretch up and then to relax into the body. And since we're dealing with negativity, this is really a great time to remember that the posture that you take is really up to you. So if you feel a lot more comfortable lying down with your knees up or your legs straight, or relaxing on the bed or whatever it might be, especially when dealing with negativity, now's the time to take care of yourself. So find a position that really, really works for you. And let's take a moment to just arrive before we dive into any kind of practice. So let go of any attempt to do anything specific or in particular, and let's just be as we are for a few moments. If you'd like to close your eyes, feel free to do so. If you want to keep them open, I recommend picking a point and staring at it. Now, whenever you're ready, I give you permission to just open up to whatever you're experiencing in this moment, with no need to fight any of it. So just noticing where your attention naturally is drawn. Could be sounds in the environment, could be patterns of light on the back of the eyelids, or something you're seeing in the room, could be body sensations, or maybe thoughts. Just noticing wherever your attention is drawn. Opening yourself up to the full spectrum of experience here and now. And if this open awareness is a canvas, I'm going to ask you to see if you can search that canvas with a high level of clarity and detail. Search every inch of that canvas for any sign of any kind of resistance or tension or negativity that might be manifesting in your experience. So maybe there's a tense part of your body, or maybe you're finding yourself drawn into stressful thinking or negative thinking. Maybe you're annoyed by a sound that you hear in your environment. Anything that you might be resisting, any tension you might be feeling, and see if you can use the power of your awareness to just pay full attention to it, accept it exactly as it is, and notice it with a high degree of clarity, noticing the shape of it, the texture of it, and just letting that negativity, that tension be as it is, and not trying to do anything about it, but just experiencing it fully with curiosity and openness. It might be subtle, like a slight flexion in your back that's feeling a little bit uncomfortable. Or maybe it's grandiose, like you're drawn into stressful thoughts about a meeting you just had, or something coming up, or something going on in your life, or this pandemic even. Could be big, could be subtle. Whatever it is, wherever your attention is drawn, when I bring up this topic of tension and negativity, there's nothing to do about it. Just accept it as it is. See if you can experience it fully. What does it feel like? What does that tension feel like? What does that negativity feel like? Where do you feel it? What is the pattern of the feeling? Is it fluctuating and changing over time, or is it static and solid? No judgment needed. Just open yourself up to the experience fully. And if this is challenging or difficult, feel free to take a step back, to not pick the biggest challenge in your life, and just focus on the little itch in your foot as opposed to the big grandiose challenges of life. So you're in control of your practice, and you want to find the right level for where you're at right now. Don't go too deep, even if it's tempting to do so. And now for this last minute, continuing with this practice, noticing any tension, any negativity, any overwhelm or discomfort you might feel. But trying to maintain that awareness from a bigger perspective. So see if you can use this last minute to just zoom out on the full arc of your life, on the full scale of planet Earth. Zooming out as far as conceivably possible, the very biggest picture. And just recontextualizing, not to say that your problems are meaningless, but just to give yourself a bit of a larger perspective on them, to see if you can get some space in order to see them more clearly in the large scale of things. And you might here introduce a little bit of loving kindness, a little bit of positivity to balance the experience. Maybe you're unlocking some positive vibration from that bigger perspective, and just tap into that. See if you can feed it into the moment. This is really just a big experiment that we're doing, playing around with this mysterious conscious experience that we all seem to have. Okay, wonderful. So you can let go of the practice there. Give yourself whatever you need in this moment, whether it's a little bit of a stretch or taking your time, opening your eyes. And I would love if you could jump into the chat window and just share whatever you're comfortable sharing about any tension or negativity you may have noticed in that practice and what it felt like to pay attention to it in this way. And of course, any other observations or questions or reports of your experience are welcome. I find one of the best parts of these live streaming meditations is a little chance to connect with people in the chat box. So please do be generous in your sharing there. And a little context about this practice. When we lean in to our negative experience, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to try to solve anything. And that often can be a really dangerous mentality to have, to say, well, you know what, I'm going to meditate this pain away, and your total objective is to never experience that pain again. Or I'm feeling sad, I'm going to meditate until I'm happy again. It can be a very frustrating exercise. And really it stems from a bit of a misunderstanding of what we're doing here. Well-being, and the science is pretty clear on this too, well-being really comes from changing our relationship with our experience. So it's not that the pain will go away, the anxiety will go away, or the depression will go away, but somehow when we're able to get a little bit of space from it, we're able to process it and deal with it in a more skillful way, and that generally contributes to our well-being. And one way to do that is to just notice it, to just become aware of it, and to pay attention to the subtle nuances. So for me, often when I'm stressed, I feel it in my shoulders. And when I'm drowsy, I feel it in my eyes. And when I have a lot going on, I notice incessant thinking of strategizing. What am I going to write in this email? How are we going to manage this project? Whatever it might be. And sometimes the awareness is just enough. When I notice, oh, my thoughts are racing about work right now, that can give me the space to make a bit of a choice. Say, you know what, I'm going to actually take a little bit of a lie down, take a little bit of a rest before continuing on, take a bit of a break. Or if I feel that tension in my shoulders, maybe I'm going to do some stretching or something like that. So giving yourself that space to make a more skillful choice is really kind of one of the powerful outcomes of being aware in this way. So I hope that was useful. I see David shared, generally hopeful to feel free to share more and more of the hard stuff. Yeah, that's really interesting. My wife and I were talking about that recently, that sometimes just having an opportunity to speak about your problems or share with someone can be enough. And so what is the mechanic of that? To me, one of the strong mechanics, it's not just the idea of sharing, but by sharing, you're giving yourself permission to just not be so inhabited in that experience, but actually open up to it and say, I'm just going to talk about this like it's a thing that happens and not the end of the world. And somehow we reframe our perspective. Liz, thank you for sharing. Negativity directed at my old co-worker for laying me off. But pulling out to a larger view took my vision to the pandemic and helped me see I'm powerless over this and move to a bit of acceptance. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Liz. And see that power. I recognize that so much in my own experience that, Liz had the wisdom to say that this isn't going to solve a problem and get that job back or stop the pandemic or something, but somehow a bit of acceptance. When we come to that, we open ourselves up to maybe take a more skillful action and not spin our wheels about ruminations about something that already happened, but say, okay, this is what it is. Here I am. What now? And I think that can be a really liberating perspective. Christine burned her hand this morning. Oh no. So focused on the pain, and as we moved out beyond ourselves, I recognized it's a small pain compared to someone with burns all over their bodies. I sent out healing thoughts. Beautiful. Yeah, there's something about that zoom out, about that bigger picture that reminds us about everyone else out there and about our suffering. And sometimes, to that same dichotomy of leaning in and leaning out, it's that dichotomy of no, your pain and discomfort is real and it's not to be trifled with, no matter how big or small. But at the same time, there's a larger perspective of that pain in our own lives and in the lives of many that I don't necessarily advocate to take that big perspective and say, you know what, my pain is meaningless. But something about just zooming out in that perspective, which Christine has just shared here, something about just doing that naturally opens us up to maybe a different view of things that changes our relationship to that pain. In this example, a burn. And I feel you on that actually, because this morning, my 1-year-old, we were kind of playing around on the bed and I was tickling him and stuff. And he got really excited and he just face planted me face to face and just smashed my nose. And so one of the things I was practicing with in our practice today was just these scorching pain coming down my nose. And when I zoomed out, similarly to that perspective, I thought first, of course, about how one day I'm going to wish I had a little 1-year-old to smash my face because he'll be older and I'll miss these days. But then I also thought about, all the other people who may not have the opportunity to play with their 1-year-old. Maybe that's not working out for them. Maybe they're not finding a relationship, or they're not able to have a child, or maybe people who used to have a 1-year-old and now, I think about my parents, now they've got this annoying adult son who's not as cute as I was probably when I was 1. And so you think about that different perspective. Carol, tightness in the chest, but pulling back, bigger picture, results in a calm alongside the tension, the two together, creating something of a balance. Beautiful, Carol. Thank you for sharing that. There's a sort of, we didn't use the word balance yet, but really that's what we're talking about. There's a balance between accepting and dealing and doing things about our pain and distracting ourselves from them and trying to solve them, but then this balance of just sitting back and accepting the pain for what it is, accepting the discomfort for what it is. And maybe the thought I'll leave you with is this idea that for me there's almost a dynamic there where sometimes your ability to do anything, to solve a problem, to work on something, to make things better for yourself or others, it doesn't really feel that accessible until we've accepted that pain. And so, if you follow any of my writing, I write a lot about activism. And that's a very challenging word, right? I think of mindfulness as a form of attention activism. And for me, when you think about an activist, the idea of let's just accept things, that really isn't compatible with activism because it feels like it's not compatible because we want to do something about that. But I would contend is actually the two are very compatible, that a very powerful activist first must accept the status quo. This is how things are. I need to see that clearly before I can make a skillful change. And I think that applies in our own life as well. So hope this was useful. Hope you're able to find balance in all this. Just so you know, if you want to continue these practices, we've got a couple of practices lined up next week. Daniela, 5 Central on Monday, Stephanie at noon, and Peter at 11. I think those are probably not on Monday. I have the times wrong here. We'll share in the chat the times of the next one, but subscribe to the channel and you'll get those links. And also don't hesitate to get the Healthy Minds program app if you want to do some of these meditations and take some of these concepts with you on the go. Thank you so much. Take care. Hope to see you next time.